Welcome to the Low Carb MD podcast. No one is beyond help. No one is beyond hope.
As we have always said, we are bringing you medical information and cutting-edge science, but none of this is medical advice. Please seek out input from your own doctor.
Hello and welcome back to the Low Carb MD podcast. Tro, today we have a cool person with us. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. I'm very excited about today's show. We have a brilliant young doctor who's going off on her own, becoming a physician entrepreneur. But besides that, she published an amazing case report in the BMJ with two co-authors. I'm not sure if you guys have all heard about them, Ramos and Jason Fung. And just an amazing case report of diabetes reversal from a territory of A1C around 10, which is a place where we usually initiate insulin, all the way down to 5.6, which is like beyond even, being pre-diabetic, now basically normal. So just an amazing case report. And I'm talking with her. I know she's been doing this kind of work for a bit. And I'm very happy to have Dr. Lichtash on. Okay, and Dr. Lichtash has a little bit of an interesting story. She went to UCLA for medical school. She did her residency training at Cedars-Sinai, and she had worked for a large medical group for a bit, and she is now going off and becoming a physician entrepreneur. She's also obtained her certification in obesity medicine. Dr. Lichtash, can we go by first names?
Of course.
Okay, Charlene, very nice to meet you. Very, very nice to meet you and have you on. So
thank you so much for having me.
Let's start. Maybe we'll go into physician entrepreneurship later in the show, but can we start with this amazing case report that was published in BMJ?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me and bringing me on to discuss this topic. So it's interesting. I've been treating type 2 diabetics for a while using intermittent fasting and a low carb diet, but this case in particular, I think, was a little outside the box. So I had a very wonderful 57-year-old woman who came into my office. She'd been basically dealing with diabetes for about 15 years. And she went through, the standard American Diabetes Association guideline diet and was eating the carbs at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And she and her husband were working pretty hard to make sure that she was doing everything right. And, over the years, she was just escalating in her need for medication. So she started with the, metformin and then would need to escalate. And every time she was escalating, she was getting the side effects of the medications and feeling just really awful. And they came to me after they found Dr. Jason Fung, and he had essentially changed the way that they were approaching her diabetes. And so by the time that I saw her, she was already fasting, and she had herself reversed her diabetes. And it was remarkable. I mean, she's a normal weight woman, so she was not overweight at all. And using fasting and the ketogenic diet, essentially, she was able to control her diabetes without causing herself to lose much weight. And I thought that this was really instructive because we think about type 2 diabetics really as pure insulin resistance. And if we can target the obesity, we can really help with the diabetes and the blood sugars. But in her, she was not overweight, and fasting and the ketogenic diet made a huge difference for her in terms of controlling her diabetes. So she went from an A1C, like you mentioned, close to 10, all the way down to 5.6. And a few very interesting facts about her fasting is that, she started with 42 hours 3 times a week, and was able to sort of come down from 42 hours 3 times a week to twice a week, and ultimately in her maintenance phase was able to get down to doing 16-hour fasts with 2 meals a day and 24-hour fasts a few times a month in order to get her A1C under control. And when she stopped fasting, because she sort of experimented, she saw that her sugars would rise. So really, she demonstrated that a combination of the ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting really works synergistically to control her diabetes. And so neither one alone was enough to control her diabetes. So a lot of interesting points that came out of that.
Yeah, what do you say to the critics of ketogenic diets and intermittent fasting who say that it is all governed by calories and weight loss? How would you, and so that the glycemic effects are all weight loss, and the issues, and even if you change the glycemia by lowering the carbohydrates, that the underlying insulin resistance may not ever change? And what do you say to that? What do you say to those people?
So that is such an important topic, I think, because in this patient in particular, because she didn't want to lose weight and she had no interest in getting her body mass index started at 21.9. So she had no interest in losing weight. Her husband and her were working together on this, essentially made sure that the number of calories that she was taking in would maintain her weight. So none of it had to do with her caloric decrease. In fact, she made sure that she was increasing her intake of fat, because once she started noticing a little bit of weight loss, she wanted to go right back up into her normal weight.
So basically, the critics of the low carb and ketogenic diets who say it's all weight loss, you think that that's unfounded, particularly based on the evidence that your patient didn't lose a pound.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the glycemia improved from an A1C of 9.3 to 5.6, and essentially completely reversed both insulin resistance and glycemia, it seems.
Yeah. So exactly. So I think that if she, she is a very important test case for all of us to learn from, because she did not have any, real change in her caloric intake in order to reverse her diabetes. And so we can really use that to understand or to prove that a calorie is not a calorie, and that the things that we hopefully are learning from this is that it is really it's essential to lower the amount of insulin that we secrete at each meal in order to control the diabetes.
Can you talk about this patient's, fasting insulin and fasting C-peptide? Did you find that she did not make a significant amount of insulin? Is she this type of patient that's what we call, type 1.5, or sometimes we say LADA or MODI? It comes with a lot of different names and acronyms, but are they this patient that is very insulin resistant and doesn't make a lot of insulin? Were they that phenotype?
Yes. So she is definitely not purely insulin resistant, and she was not measurably an autoimmune type 1 diabetic. So she was somewhere in the spectrum between type 1 and type 2, which also adds to what we can learn from her, because we know that with people that don't produce enough insulin, and they're somewhere along that spectrum, that even using a ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting in them is safe and it works well. And she felt great. She really, she was waking up in the middle of the night hypoglycemic, meaning her blood sugars were dropping when she was being put on all these different medications for her diabetes. But when she totally reversed her diabetes through a lifestyle approach, she was vital. She was feeling like she could continue this indefinitely, and that's what she plans to do. So I think that that's, it just shows us that doing intermittent fasting and a ketogenic diet can be a way of life that's sustainable and that can really reverse the diabetes.
And the interesting thing about this case report is it wasn't like a 2-month, this was over 14 months. She was weight stable for 14 months. Her A1C walked down, okay, into the beyond the range of even pre-diabetes, which is amazing. I'm, I got chills and goosebumps reading this case report, because it shows what we know.
Right.
It shows what we know.
And I think the important part is looking at different racial groups. And I don't know her racial heritage, but I'm seeing that a lot of my Indian patients and Asian patients, where they could have a normal BMI and their sugars are out of control or insulin's out of control.
Yeah.
And also I've seen that I had 12 people in my old practice that were normal weight or underweight that had type 2 diabetes. And it stunned me at first. I thought, how can this be happening? It's only as overweight people who get it, but you realize that's not true, especially nowadays.
Yeah. I actually share your experience. I have, I can think of at least one patient who is normal weight, actually happens to be of Indian origin, and doing quite well on intermittent fasting and a low carb diet to control his diabetes. And you wouldn't expect, somebody who is normal weight to be able to maintain their weight and not get very, overly thin when doing this type of approach, but it does work.
What I love is you're showing the also with this case study and case report is the power of intermittent fasting, the power of a ketogenic diet, but particularly the combination and how they both promote fat oxidation. They both improve glycemia. They both improve insulin resistance. Our group published a case series on binge eating, and we have a case series coming out on severe hypertriglyceridemia for this combined approach, because I think it's much more powerful. For most of people, just intermittent fasting alone is enough. My tiny little wife, she was weight stable, eating an 8-hour window, and she's fine. She's insulin sensitive, and she's great. There's some people where intermittent fasting is enough. There's some people who just need low carb, or lowering the carbohydrates. But for some, and particularly the patients both you and Brian talked about, those very insulin resistant patients, and I agree. Sometimes it obeys those ethnic origins, particularly the Asian, sub-Asian populations. They can be thin and they may need that dual approach. So can you talk about how you got into, how is it that you came to, using these approaches in your patients?
Yeah, definitely. I was really conflicted during my training, as I think we all probably were, giving the messages to our type 2 diabetics that, you should eat 30 to 45 grams of carbohydrates 3 times a day, and make sure not to vary from that at each meal. And I felt like I was just promoting more insulin resistance by doing that. And so when I went into practice, I was really looking for a way to get my patients, or some sort of method to help my diabetic patients really reverse their insulin resistance, because it didn't make sense to me for them to come into my office and get medications that are potentially worsening their insulin resistance making them hungrier, and then, you know, perpetuating their diabetes. And so I really can tell you, I had this amazing turning point with this one patient early on. And essentially, he's this, you know, 20-something-year-old morbidly obese patient who'd never really eaten normally in his life. He basically had no idea he was a diabetic until he went into a state of near death called diabetic ketoacidosis. And he had such extremely high sugars that he was essentially hospitalized for that. And then I met him for the first time after that hospitalization, and he came to my office, 300 plus pounds. Now, obviously on insulin, eating 45 grams of carbs per his nutritionist 3 times a day. And I just got a snapshot of his future, and I like saw those, you know, the insulin requirements are going to go up. His weight problem is just going to get worse, and all that mixed messaging that he was going to get, and confusion about his diet. And I just looked at him, and I remember putting my hands down from the computer and just saying, you know, let's work together. Are you ready to get rid of your diabetes? And you're looking at a lifetime of disease, and no other doctor is really going to do this with you. And he was so appreciative. He was game. He was just like, let's do this. And in 3 months, I will never forget it, his hemoglobin A1C went from a severely uncontrolled diabetic, I think it was around like 13 or 15. And he came back to me with a hemoglobin A1C of 5.4 off all of his medications. And that was in 3 months. And
that's a case report.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember, you know, his family even gave me, like, they framed this message that I sent to him and brought it in, and they all changed their lifestyle as well. And I was so moved by this, because this guy was going to just be perpetually an insulin dependent diabetic, and there was no reason for him to be that. And so, you know, that was really my turning point. And when I started doing this more heavily, you know, and I also realized that there's, you know, so many reasons why a medical practitioner it's easier for them to treat with a standard approach. And, you know, the standard approach is escalating medication and, you know, kind of brushing over the diet and lifestyle. And I think the most significant of these reasons is that weight and diet have been so seriously stigmatized, and they are attached to such feelings of shame that when you treat obesity and overweight, it requires such a re-education of the doctor and of the patient.
So,
and coming,
you hit the nail on the head. I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, please.
It's ignorance.
Yes.
It's ignorance on the doctor's part.
Yes.
It's not the patient's fault. They don't need to know better.
Right.
Right? We need to be able to teach them.
Right.
So I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you because I feel strongly
100%.
about it. The reason why it's laziness, because they don't want to put the effort in for their patients. They're not paid to do so by the insurance companies. Okay. And it's easier for them to write a medication. So it's the path of least resistance. They don't have to deal with the shame and the emotions.
Right.
But on most of all, they don't know. They don't know why people are hungry, why people are eating, why people eat the way they do. They don't know.
Well, it's not only that. It's this system. We are so beat down. I've done it for 17 years of my life, right? And you don't have the time to educate. And when I did, I was frustrated because that took away from time from my family and myself, because I'd work through lunch every single day trying to help someone. And that's the problem when the doctor has 15-minute follow-up and it takes an hour and 20 minutes or something to explain this stuff. We just can't do it. It's not that the doctor's lazy and dumb necessarily. It's that they're overwhelmed by the system, because we're overwhelmed by a bunch of sick people. And until we have to, I just realized I had to do the upfront investment of my time to make that patient a better patient and a healthier patient. Instead of dealing with all the complications, we prevent it before it happens. But 80% of the people say, just throw me a pill because I don't want to change my lifestyle. And that's the hard part.
100%. I agree with you totally. I think, as physicians, we're put in a really difficult position when we want so much to be there for our patients and to listen and to make them better and have that time with them. And then we don't, the system doesn't allow us to have that time. That's really one big issue. And Tro, I totally agree with you. I mean, I think the ignorance is not necessarily, it's because a lot of doctors, we are a product of our society, right? So we blame the patient sometimes, or that, I think that's the overarching approach is, why is this a weakness? Is this a lack of willpower? And it really starts with educating the doctor and the patient on the drivers of weight, the drivers of hunger. And this education that we can give is really a gift, because when you give that education, you can lift that emotional weight that is attached to obesity, and you really pave or open the path forward. And the path is understandable, and it doesn't feel as restrictive or pointless as the failing calorie deprivation model that we're used to giving patients. And
now you got me excited. Now
yeah.
you got me excited. The failing keto model.
Yeah, and that's part of it is all these patients. Paulo is a perfect example. Someone we had on the podcast. I have most of my patients listen to that because he did Medifast, lost 100 pounds, gains back 160 pounds. He did, it's one of those things where all these people, I know it. I did the HCG diet. I did Weight Watchers. I did Jenny Craig. I did all this stuff and I lost weight. And so I had a lady yesterday and this is pertinent to what we're talking about. RN, retired many years, orthopedics. And we talked about it. And I talked to her about insulin resistance and she was blown away. She started crying. She said, I feel bad for all the people I gave bad advice to my entire career, because we put them in the hospital and give them sugar water in their vein. And then we give them insulin, and then we're giving them orange juice and toast and cereal for breakfast. And she started crying and she's like, I just can't believe I did that to people and to myself. She goes, now it's like, she's stunned. And I said, well, trust me, I was the same boat for a lot of years. I never skip breakfast, eat 6 times a day, all this stuff that we told that was absolutely incorrect, especially your study shows that, your case study shows that eating 6 times a day was not the answer for that patient. She was never going to come off her diabetes medicine or get her A1C under control. It was never going to work. So why would it work for other people? It just doesn't work.
Yeah. You're right. I completely agree with you. I mean, I think that reducing the calories in and exercising more, ultimately you become hungrier. You're eating several times a day, 6 times a day or however much. And you're, a lot of these programs are telling patients, eat, even if you're not hungry, you're not eating enough.
Yeah, his name is Yoni Friedhoff. Okay. And he wrote a book called The Diet Fix, which says eat immediately upon waking up and eat 5 to 7 times a day and have some chocolate if you like it. Right. And it's completely the wrong message. Sorry to, I don't like to.
But you guys are good friends though, Tro. You guys are good. But
yeah,
but it's hard because there's different approaches. And so, part of it is really understanding. And I'm curious about this patient's fasting insulin, what that did over time, and if exercise was a factor in this also.
So she exercises, she's pretty fit and she exercises. She unfortunately didn't have a starting fasting insulin, but the fasting insulin in her over time, it was pretty, it was on the lower end. And so even when her A1C reached 5.8, her fasting insulin, actually at 6.4, I can tell you, her fasting insulin was on the lower end. So she was not the typical insulin resistant type 2 diabetic.
Yeah, so she wasn't producing enough insulin to, yeah, exactly.
Did it go up? Sorry, did it stay put? Did it basically stay the same? Do you remember it all?
The data on that we don't have, because she only gave me one. Fasting insulin that she had, and that was around 6.4, if I'm remembering correctly.
Oh, that's pretty high.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
6.4 is pretty high. So
Yeah.
she's making insulin.
Well,
Yeah,
you know,
she's total. Yeah.
in this discussion, I think I had a patient who was basically type 1.5. I mean, really, his insulin level was like 1.5, 1 point. His A1C was 7.2, 7.3, and he was really working hard trying to get his diet right. Had a couple of drinks every now and again, but really was pretty tight on his control. I mean, on his diet, but we couldn't budge his. And so I was debating whether to give him a low dose insulin to help him out a little bit. And then we said, let's try some weight bearing exercise. He dropped his A1C from 7.2 to 6.1.
Interesting. Wow.
Incredible with exercise, because he just made his body very sensitive to that little bit of insulin he was making. And that's what my Asian and Indian patients, I try to say, look, let's try to get you doing some weight bearing exercise, because adding muscle mass is going to make you more insulin sensitive to that little bit of insulin you have, right? Not necessarily that you're insulin resistant, but trying to get the most bang for your buck on what you're making.
Can I talk about the data for that? 22 minutes of HIIT 5 days a week will lower your A1C by 1 point, just via insulin sensitivity, by 1 point.
And look at what the drugs that we pay all this money for won't have that kind of impact.
Yeah.
Can I want to, that's an amazing, absolutely, Brian. I see the same thing, that those really insulinopenic, like low insulin producing, very insulin resistant. It's like, you can't always work on glycemia. You got to think about insulin sensitivity, and that exercise is a key component. I have another question for you, Charlene. So here you are trying to practice in a way that requires you to counsel significantly. Okay. And
Yeah.
I know what it's like working in big hospital systems. And Brian, of course, knows what it's like working within that HMO kind of get paid for 7-minute model. So can you talk to me about the difficulties you faced kind of working? I mean, I don't want you to, counseling, I guess, can you talk to me about the difficulties you face counseling patients in the finite time doctors have in typical large medical groups and within the insurance model?
Definitely. I mean, I was constantly behind in my schedule, which my patients came to understand was, the type of care that I want to deliver. And so they would happily wait for it. But it's incredibly challenging. I mean, I was calling patients at night and calling them to finish our discussions, following up with them in a week just by phone, all on my own time to make sure that I can get them the care that they need. But, the problem is that, and I think it's a national problem, is that we give a lot of time for specialists to see patients generally, comparatively. Whereas with internal medicine and primary care, it's not, I think a lot of times it's not valued as it should be. And the amount of change that we can make in a person's life really is not put, is not put above the importance of a specialist when they actually have a disease that needs to be treated by a specialist. And so I think that's where the challenge comes for primary care doctors. Is that, I think probably you guys have felt the same thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But so did you find you had to change? I mean, I know the answer, but tell me, so where did that lead you to? That kind of frustration, the time behind, the fact that you're, marginalized as a primary care doctor. Where did that leave you?
I mean, it really led me to rethink how I'm practicing primary care. And I had to, essentially I had to leave this practice where I care so deeply about my patients, because I was burning out. And I felt like I was not delivering the type of care that I wanted to deliver in this setting. I was working like 20 to 30 hours overtime a week just to be able to take care of my patients the right way. And I think that that's really sad for a primary care doctor to not be able to deliver the type of care that they want. I think a lot of, you either, in many ways, you either give into the system or you decide to step out of it and to radically change the way and to practice in your ideal, medical practice. And that's the type of change that I decided to do so that I can really treat my patients the way that I wanted to, while also being a happy doctor. Because I think being a happy doctor is really underrated. You guys probably feel very similarly.
Yeah. So what's in store for you? I know you're currently at Cedars-Sinai, right? But you're kind of planning to go off on your own. Is that right?
Yes, I'm planning to start my own practice and be able to spend time listening to my patients and working with them. And so what I envision doing is a medical weight loss program with my patients that's really going to help, target all the different and very complicated issues that are attached to weight. So, I think going back to the calories model, talking to patients about calories is often, that trigger for disordered thinking. And I really want to be able to have time to talk to my patients about their automatic thoughts and the dysfunctional thoughts that are basically keeping them or sabotaging their efforts to lose weight. And, dysfunctional automatic thoughts are things like, I'm going to be fat forever. This is hopeless. I've had patients tell me that they're feeling so disgusted with themselves and that every diet they ever try is ultimately going to fail. And, these sort of like all or nothing. If I'm not perfect in my diet, then I'm just going to give up because it's never going to work. And I know, we're all vulnerable. We're all human beings, and we all live with sabotaging thoughts, whether it's about our weight or about other things. And a lot of times what we do is they become our reality. That's our truth. We don't even give them a second thought. And we brush over them. And working on these automatic thoughts is so important. Bringing them to the surface and really dealing with them and identifying, what can we do to change our thought patterns? How do I get that thought that, I had one patient tell me that when she sits and she feels, she looks down, that it just reminds her of what a failure she is, when she's looking at her body. And how am I going to help her by giving her the tools, that how to lose weight and the education without addressing that thought that's sitting with her every day, that she's really having that low self-esteem and that feeling that she is not worth anything because of the way that she looks, or she's disgusted with herself. So that's what I envision working with my patients on, in addition to educating them about the drivers of weight and hunger, because there's so many things that are, that people sit with. They sit with the shame, they sit with the mixed messages about diet, and they sit with their own, lack of self-esteem. And I think targeting all of these is very, very important for a comprehensive weight management program. And so, so that's what
I've consistently seen that lack of self-love and lack of self-care. People coming in here asking me for help losing weight, they typically, I find that they're so altruistic. They would care for their dog, they would care for their kids, their mother, their father, and put, and do anything for them. But when it comes to themselves, it's like they are lost. Yeah. And so teaching self-care and self-love and self-forgiveness and dropping that emotional the emotional barriers is really important, and I'm glad you're focusing in on that. Brian, what say you?
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. I mean, I've been stunned by that over the last 3 weeks of being in practice here, and how many people just, I listened to a podcast one time, and they were talking about negative self-talk. And he was basically saying it like he was making the comparison of a golfer. You get up there and you have a caddy who tells you what club to hit, where to hit it, how to swing and all that. And then the guy hits in the water, right? And the caddy goes, hey, no problem. Next time we're going to do this. We're going to change your club up one. That's my bad. We should, and really saying, instead of saying you're an idiot, you hit it wrong, say, oh, we learned something. So like you say, Troy, I love that, is saying, okay, when you blow it, let's figure out, why did you blow it that day? And why was it that if you blow it that one day, why did you blow it for the next week after that? And so there's a lot of psychology in that, where we don't give ourselves grace, or other people around us grace. And that's part of it, is, the frustration, especially these days. I mean, so many people are just giving up and they have no hope. And so Dr. Unwin really impressed me with that, of hope. Give me someone hope, saying, okay, your sugars are high, but we got this. Here's our stepwise approach, take a step at a time, and we're going to make this happen. And so once we have that and we're a team, we could accomplish a ton. Now, if I could be the smartest guy in the world, but if you're not bought in, I can't help you, right? Or you could be the best patient in the world, and I don't give you good advice, and I beat you down because you had a cookie one day. One of my patients is 84 years old. She's lost a bunch of weight. She's doing great. And she had one Snickers bar, or one of those little snack bars. And she's like, oh my gosh, I blew it. I go, little thing, that's not going to affect you much. Okay, let's get back on the track and you're okay. So, but it's one of those things where it's a moral failure, because all these people have lost 100 pounds and gained it back. And that's the scary part. It's not the losing weight. They know they can do that, but maintaining weight loss is the key, because you could do it. You could starve yourself and lose a bunch of weight, but your body's going to want to survive. And that's the reason you gain your weight back is not because it's a moral failure. It's because your body was in panic mode, because you were eating 300 calories a day for 2 years or whatever, So it's that kind of stuff of giving them the tools and allowing them to understand. It's like, hey, look at the path, and you're where you're at now, but tomorrow you're going to be better than you are today. And your sugars are going to be better, and your blood pressure. And I think we really have to hammer home the metabolic health aspect of what we're doing, because we could get metabolically healthy in a couple of days, 2 or 3 days. We could get rid of liver fat and all that, and make us less likely to have COVID and all this stuff. Instead of being in fear and eating cookies all day because we're stressed out, we have to make those kind of changes also.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you brought up a lot of good points, and I think that it's the truth that person keeps sacred. Like, this is all or nothing, that we really need to unearth and bring out and work on. Because just like Dr. Jason Fung, he talks about the proximate and the ultimate causes of things. Right. So he says the proximate cause of being overweight is calories, right? But that your food intake, and, but are we really trying to target the food intake and the calories? Are we trying to target something much bigger than that, which is the hormonal responses to the hormonal shifts that occur that make us hungry? And if we reach and target the hormones, then we will be able to solve the problem. But it's never when you are dealing only with the proximate cause, which in this case is what they're eating, right? Or the calories that they're eating, that we're going to deal with we're going to be able to treat globally their weight loss and their weight issue. We have to deal with everything together. We have to deal with the hormones, the thoughts, who is this person, and how do we get them to their goal? And so I think identifying that they're thinking all or nothing. If I eat this cookie, then I will, ultimately fail in my program. That will just take them 10 steps back. So we really need to deal with that ultimate cause, and not skip over it. And I agree with you.
We make it easy right away. I mean, our policy is, if you can't restrict the food, be honest with yourself on day one, replace what you can't restrict until you figure it out. That's it. Make it easy. Get a low glycemic version of whatever it is you cannot restrict. Get a low sugar, low carb version until we figure it out. So you don't even have to. And you want to be good? You can be good. You don't have to have them. Put them in the, but you know what? There's going to come a time where you're stressed out, you're under financial pressure, your mom's sick, your dog's sick, and you're going to have a case of the, the effits, as Amy, one of my health coaches, calls it. You know, Amy Igus, who's an amazing woman. You know, that's the time where you have to prepare for.
Yeah.
Right? That's the time of weight regain. That's the time of going off, right? You have to self-love that person. And I think that's something we've lost focus on, and we don't have compassion for. You know, it's that the person who's struggling. Now, I had my own issues with food. I literally would eat, you know, I would work shifts in the hospital, and I would see the chocolate that my colleagues would like literally keep in their, you know, little lockers for 6 months. And I would think to myself, what kind of people are these that they can keep chocolate for 6 months? And I would eat their chocolate. Okay. Yeah. And I have to remind myself very often to go back to that spot. What did I need then to win? Right? When I was addicted, craving food, under pressure, sleepless, tired, you know, and hungry. So I think that's the, you know, we all promote, well, obviously real food is like what we need, right? Real food is satiating, it's filling. But I think we have to give our patients a framework to be bad.
100%.
You know, Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, it's catching it sooner. Like, you know, what we're doing with the continuous glucose monitor, a good friend of mine has one on, and his sugars were 496 a couple of weeks ago, and now he's running in the 70s and 80s. But then he spiked up to 200. So I called him, what the heck did you do? Guess what he did? I don't want to say the brand of chicken, but it's a very famous fried chicken here. And so he had a couple of pieces of chicken and some coleslaw. He goes, I just had coleslaw and chicken. I said, guess what was in that? And then we talked about it. And then we made him an air fried chicken, and he was happy, and it was delicious, and his sugars dropped after he ate it, right? So you start realizing it's a win because you catch it right away. If I wait like the standard of care, as Charlene knows, is, okay, you're diabetic, we'll see you in 3 months. Here's what you do, and we'll see you in 3 months. Good luck. Guess what? The holidays intervene, and they gain 40 pounds by the time they come back because we're not monitoring them closely. So it's like, could you imagine Alcoholics Anonymous if they had an alcohol sensor? As soon as that goes off, your sponsor gets a call, and they intervene before you're in the alley somewhere drunk. So it's the same thing with food. And I think that's a big thing we're learning. It's an individualized thing. Some people can have one cookie and they're fine. They enjoy it. They're good. They go on. Other people have one cookie and they think they're the biggest loser on earth, and they eat cookies for the next 2 months and they gain all their weight back, and then they give up. And that's why it's so frustrating. But if we're following people every week and say, what was hard this week? What are your victories? What'd you do? And so people are coming back, and we see that they're doing great. Like one of my guys, I saw him the first day, he goes, look, I'm going to do all this stuff, but I'm not going to fast. I'm like, okay, no problem. You don't have to. No problem. And then we just talked yesterday, and he said, guess what? I skipped breakfast and lunch yesterday. I wasn't even hungry, so I didn't eat. I thought you weren't going to fast. But just naturally, now he's fat adapted, and he knows he's not hungry. He was starving all the time. So the thought of fasting freaked him out, right? And I think a lot of us, see that. And so it's exciting when we see the progression. I think, you know, obviously you would have been the first guest not to talk about Jason Fung. Everyone has been impacted by him. Yeah. And so, because he changed the paradigm. For me, he changed the paradigm. And he was the one who helped me through and made me understand, oh, okay. It's not that we have a shortage of insulin. We have a ton of insulin. He goes, your diabetics before they get diabetes have the highest insulin in the world, but they're insulin resistant, so they need more and more. So when you start understanding the science of this stuff, you think, okay, it makes sense now, right? It makes sense. Why would you be giving sugar to someone that sugar's their problem? It just doesn't make sense. So anyways, those kind of things, when you logically step back, I think everyone in medicine, we just said, that's the way you do it, and everyone does it that way. Eat every 2 hours, you have to carb load all the time for exercise. Like, we all know that's not true because we have continuous glucose monitors now. They can tell us that. So the technology is really helping us a lot, because it's not my opinion anymore. Put on a CGM and see what happens. And it's not magic. It's just what happens. That's physiology, right? So, that's what's exciting about what you're doing. And I'm excited because I'll tell you, I had 4 patients come down from Northern California to San Diego. They had to drive all that way, waste gas, go through that stuff. So now they could just stop in LA and see you, and that's a lot easier. Like, you think there's no one in between me and Northern California? Right. And Kristen, my partner, it's crazy because they're sick of their doctor telling them you're an idiot, you're going to kill yourself by not eating sugar, by cutting out healthy whole wheat is what they say, right? It's like, well, you're getting better and your doctor is saying you're getting worse and all your numbers are improving. And it's frustrating because people just want someone to say, hey, what you're doing is okay. Don't worry about it, you know, and guide them and keep them in line. So having someone like you, it's great because that's what we have to do. Really, it's ridiculous that we have people driving halfway across the state or, you know, crossing state lines to come in to get care. It's just insane to me.
A few points. I agree with you completely. A few points on that. One is that I think intermittent fasting has scares some doctors because they think that this could be, is this disordered eating? Is this, you know, am I giving my patient an eating disorder if I'm telling them to fast? And my response to that is, you know, people are coming with eating disorders, and that's why they are where they are. And you're liberating them. You're giving them education that is invaluable when you're teaching them what happens when they fast, and you're teaching them the physiology. And the other thing is that I think a lot of people, and you know, me included, all of us, when we feel an external restriction, sometimes we panic. Like we don't know how to deal with that restriction. It doesn't feel good. And we're being asked to change our norms radically. And I think one of the tips that I give my patients, which I think helps a lot, is to sort of like restructure their pantry and the refrigerator, and to know all the foods that they have in there that they can access when they're hungry. So instead of having cereal and oatmeal and crackers and cookies, have your sardines and nuts and, you know, the things that are whole foods that you can keep that are really easily accessible. Like you just pop open a can of sardines and there you go. You have something that's going to satiate you. Or what's in your refrigerator that you like, that you've cut up, that's ready to go. And when people do this happily and they feel like they have the food that they like, that they're looking forward to, it makes it so much easier. Then, you know, the person should feel some room for freedom within their diet. And I think that's really important, because nobody's going to stick to something where they feel overly restricted and they don't like it, you know? So I think that's really important.
Exactly. And no one's going to stick to exercise that they hate. No one's going to follow a doctor who's mean to them every time they come in. So I think it's a lot of that kind of stuff. And, you know, the reality is the doctors are so busy, they don't care. They're like happier if you don't come back sometimes, you know, because you're so busy. It's like, okay, if I had less patients, my life will be a little bit better. So it's a hard thing. And I think, you know, I think all of us have seen that practicing medicine and realizing I don't want to be that doctor. I don't want to be the one who doesn't care about their patients and like tries to rush through and say, here's 3 pills, see you in 3 months, right? It's a hard system. And, you know, I do have compassion for the docs because I know we all came into this to help people and to make a difference. And when we're not, especially the female docs, I mean, suicide rate among females doctors is the highest in the country of any profession, because you get in there and your life is shot and you're working tons of hours and you see your patients getting sicker and you're not helping them. And it's miserable. It's a miserable existence. So I think, you know, people like you who get that and say, okay, I'm going to take, for me, I took a massive pay cut, but guess what? I come home and I'm happy now because I enjoy it. I love it. It's not like work to me. Tro, you know what I'm talking about. It's not work when you see someone that get it and their light goes off and says, oh my gosh, there's hope. And you can help me through this and we'll do it together as a team, rather than being shouted down saying, you know, you're not sticking to what I'm telling you to do. They are. That's a problem. Doctors out there listening, they're listening to you, but you're giving them terrible, I almost said a troll word. You're giving very bad advice because you don't know any better. So I think the more we're learning and we're seeing the success, and you know, I think it's a really exciting. It's exciting to hear doctors like you coming on board and saying, hey, look, this is working, and you know the impact Jason's having on everyone. And you know, I think, you know, again, we have to be a healthier population. When you see the statistics that only 2% of people over 65 years of age are metabolically healthy, only 12% of the rest of us are metabolically healthy, that's a total disaster. So, you know, we can get into the politics of this a little bit, but, you know, I know we have to cut it short. But the point is, we're keeping all the fast food restaurants open because they're critical businesses, but the gyms are all closed. You can't work out, you know? And so figuring out how do we do it at home? How do we take care of ourselves? Because the bottom line is we have to take care of ourselves. If we can't go to the gym, do it at home. There's not an excuse to be sitting there doing nothing. So we have to take it on ourselves, say, okay, how do I make myself the best candidate for surviving, getting something like COVID or whatever the next thing to come along is being metabolically healthy. That's what the data shows. So what you're doing is exciting. Tro, what you're doing is amazing. So Charlene, how do people get in touch with you if they want to track you down? I mean, you're just still, like, you haven't even started yet. So we may have to, you know, hold this off and run it when you're getting closer to starting a practice to, you know, get some people to you. But do you have like a address or a phone number, or how do they follow you on social media? How do people get in touch with you? Because a lot of people are going to want to track you down, especially in Los Angeles, I know.
Awesome. So, going on my website, www.drlichtash.com, and all my contact information is going to be up soon. And, I really look forward to starting this practice. I mean, I feel like there's such a need for it, and I'm happy to work with, anybody who feels that I can benefit them. And I'll tell you just to leave one last thing, which I think is really important, is that, I think everybody has the potential for leadership. And just to get a little philosophical, sorry. And I think that in this time, just like you mentioned, COVID and everything is up in the air and things seem so just overwhelming and vulnerable. And I think we all need to use our experiences and to help inspire other people to be leaders in their own life. And that's really what I want to do with my patients and what you guys are doing right now, which I really commend you for. And we should all continue doing that. And yeah, thank you so much.
No, thank you. This is
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah, it's exciting for us. And that's so true, is to give hope in these days where everything is dark. You want to be a light. And so there's people who are really taking control of their life right now. And it's exciting that we could be a part of that journey, So the more the merrier. I think the more of us are stepping out and seeing it and seeing the insanity. And it's like they say, you can't unsee what you've seen. So if you're listening out there and you're a doc and you want to change what you're doing, let us help you. Listen to some of these podcasts, and also the patients. If you're 400, 500 pounds and struggling, don't give up hope. There's hope. There's always hope. And you can be better tomorrow than you are today. And I think that's an important message now. So Tro, why don't you close us, man?
No, it's amazing work that you've done. This case series, I think, calls into question everything. The case report that you've done calls into question a lot of the mantras and myths that we know are not true, that diabetes and insulin resistance are governed by weight loss and calories. That's not true. Clearly, that's not the case, as shown in your patient. And we know that not to be true. And we know that metabolic health can be reversed, as Brian mentioned, in days, okay, with liver disease, fatty liver, and metabolic health being reversed in days, not months and weeks, irrespective of weight loss. We all know what happens immediately for glycemia on a diet. That can be reversed right away on day one. So, and that we don't need to live in shame and blame, as you mentioned, Charlene, that our patients can be that one little slip up, it's not the end of the world. We can reverse you, as Brian said, in days. So there's no need to live in that failure. It's not a failure. It's an opportunity to learn. As Brian mentioned, you guys are so insightful. I'm so honored to be able to interview you, Charlene, and Brian, to be able to work with you. I'm so excited for what's going on with your practice right now. Both of you guys, I can't wait to see what the future holds. And maybe one day we'll all be working together in one, big low carb family. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows what the future holds, but it's exciting. It's exciting times. So Charlene, thanks so much. Thanks for your
Thank
case
you
report.
guys so
It's
much
a huge deal.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for the leadership you guys have shown. And it's because of you and doctors like you that I'm doing this. So thank you.
Thank you. And everyone, thank you for listening. Thanks for sticking with us. A lot of great information here. And so this is a CME, continuing medical education, because this is great, because Tro and I learn all the time. And this is really an important case report. So hopefully you can pick up a copy. Tro, hopefully we can link to it. That would be
Yeah,
great.
we'll put the link. I mean, there's this journal called the British Medical Journal. It was published in there, so
Yeah.
you can find it there. Co-authors, obviously, Megan Ramos and Jason Fung.
Yeah. So thank you for sticking with us. Have a great week, and just keep positive. Everything's going to be okay.
This was great. We're good,
Awesome.
Brian?
Yeah, I just have to hit stop recording. Yes.